My name is Monica Kammenduur. This video is the recording of a PAM remote advice coaching for the Kousba municipality in the north of Lebanon. The topic is vermicomposting for small farmers, for them in order to use the organic waste of their farms for the benefit of their soils. The coaching consists of weekly video conferences in August and September 2024. The video conferences consist of 8 parts, and this video is about the second part about air, chopping, and the carbon-nitrogen ratio. Vermiculture is livestock farming. Worms require air to breathe, food dominated by accessible carbon in decomposition to digest, moist to maneuver and to support the digestion up to about 70% of moisture, a temperature range in the living environment of around 10 to 13 degrees, protection from acids, alkalines, poisons, harmful pharmaceuticals and chemicals. Worms also require protection from climatic extremes, against overheating, so they need shade. Against cold and frost, they may need winter insulation, for example with straw. From getting soaking wet, because then they cannot breathe, so they need shielding from heavy rains. And against draft winds that might dry the pile, and so they need shielding from the wind. Let me first talk about the ingredients for compost. I start with the basic ingredients, then about manure and other ingredients. The basic 4 ingredients for compost are air, water, green materials and brown materials. Green materials and brown materials are confusing words. I will explain. Green materials, for example, are raw kitchen scraps, which may come in many different colors. Grass clippings and green yard waste are usually green, but coffee ground is very brown and still it's called green material. On the other hand, brown materials are like old newspapers, which are grey, cardboard is brown, sawdust may be brown but can also be very yellow, and old dry leaves may be even yellow or red. The difference between green materials and brown materials is about the carbon-nitrogen ratio. I come back to that later. First, about manure. Manure can make great compost. However, manure is rich in nitrogen, so it's not considered a brown material, it is connected to the green ones. And you can use it unless the animals are recently dewormed, meaning treated with anthelmintics, because that may harm the worms in your vermiculture. If manure is involved in any way, the thermophilic phase should not be messed with because of the risk of pathogens, including zoonosis, because of undesired herbal seeds and pest insects and insects add eggs inside, and the increased variability within the pile of the decomposition process. Therefore, I give you the option, maybe you want to use manure for biogas production and use the digestate for compost making. I will not go into that, but at the end I will give you a reference. If there is a particular reason for avoiding the thermophilic heating, for example, to nurture specific microbes, then don't use manure of any kind in your compost. How about other materials? Don't use any shining carbons because they contain plastic, like glossy magazines or paper-like carbons with plastic films. Beware of any hidden plastics. Cooked vegetables can be used, but only in small quantities. But I ask you, why aren't you feeding those to the chicken? They may benefit from them. Eggshells and dried soft chicken and fish bones may be used in small quantities, but they should be very finely chopped or grinded. Unsalted dry meat and other dry animal products may be used in small quantities. No bones because they are too hard, nothing sticky or too fresh, and beware of salt-cured items like salt-cured meat or cheese, and beware of any plastic covers. So there is not much of animal products that you may want to need and to use. In general, if you cannot chop it because it's too hard or too sticky, don't use it. The thermophilic phase is important for hygiene because it kills materials like seeds, eggs, pathogens, etc., and prepares those elements for decomposition, in particular from all manure type sources. It is also important as a startup to booster the carbon decomposition. So if you want to benefit from compost, you need a solid chopper or shredder. You better buy a solid one with a few neighbors because you don't need it on a daily basis, better than buying a cheap one that may not work as you want it. Here you see one at work, shredding and chopping all kinds of materials. Chop everything to ensure the aerobic conditions. So even dry leaves should be chopped to ensure that the material remains airy. Chop the green material separately and allow fresh cow manure that is too sticky to mature for example, for a year. Mix after establishing the right volume. What are the carbon-nitrogen ratios in my materials? You call them brown materials if the carbon-nitrogen ratio is high, like fallen leaves, old hay and straw, newspapers, wood shreddings, cartonboard, that you call brown materials, brown referring to high carbon-nitrogen ratio. Green materials have a low carbon-nitrogen ratio, like raw vegetables, fresh grass, fresh herbs, other garden products, or one-year-old matured cow manure. How to decide for the carbon-nitrogen ratio? The desired ratio depends on the fungal bacterial ratio conditions that you have in the soil where you want to use your compost. Normal conditions, you use carbon-nitrogen ratio 25:1 up to 35:1. That is common for frequently used horticultural gardens. The handout is that you use 70:30 or even 60:40 volume percent brown and green materials, the latter including manure. The compost can reach fast a sufficient stability. From about 12 weeks plus, you can already use it. It is rich of aerobic bacterial biodiversity, and the soil quality will remain if the root fungi persist, and the vegetables will grow well. If the conditions are not very well, and here I give you an extreme for completely degraded soils, then you want the ratio up to 75:1. the handout is up to 90 to 10 volume percent brown and green materials, including the latter with manure. The compost will mature very slowly. It may take up to 2 to 3 years. But then, in the end, the compost is very rich of fungal biodiversity for restoring plant root fungi presence, and the soil quality will improve dramatically while growing, for example, cover plants. Here is a slide that I took from Dr. Johnson again. It is about the fungal bacterial ratio in reality. At the very top, you see old forests. When there is a lot going on in terms of old growth, then you know for sure that under the ground the fungal bacterial ratio is very high. A lot of fungi are growing there. At the other extreme, when the soil is barren or nearly barren, there may be microbes, a lot of microbes, the cyanobacteria, other bacteria, protozoa, even fungi, but not the root fungi that you like. If you are in those conditions, you can fertilize what you like, but your crops will not grow because of the lack of root fungi. So you need to restore them. In the middle, you see the fungal bacterial ratio 1:1, and actually that is what agriculture usually is about. Agriculture is controlled disturbance, and you replace with your fertilization with compost enough of the fungi and the bacteria to grow your crops the next year. Okay, so far for today. In summary, the terms brown and green materials are very commonly used, but they are confusing because they refer to high or low carbon content of the materials compared to the nitrogen content. And it's not necessarily about its color. Select your materials before you put it on the compost pile. If you can't chop it, don't use it. And chop all your materials before using them. The higher the carbon nitrogen ratio, the slower the composting process. But the higher the fungal bacteria ratio and the microbiome biodiversity, which is good for restoring degraded soils. So here you have the references, including something about biogas production. If you have any questions about these episodes, please send me an email and we can discuss this next time. Thank you very much.